Are we ready to get started? I just want to confirm before I get started. Awesome, thank you. I couldn't see any of the video and things, so apologies. Hello, I'm David Kroom, Assistant Director for Post-Secondary at Ascend at the Aspen Institute. I want to welcome you all today for our session on the Parent-Powered Solutions Fund, a model for participatory grant making. Lexi, can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, I'm not seeing the PowerPoint. Are we still sharing? Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Lexi. So as I mentioned, I'm David Kroom, Assistant Director at Ascend. Ascend at the Aspen Institute is a national hub for breakthrough ideas and collaborations that move children and adults in their lives together toward economic security, educational success, and health and well-being. Our model embraces a two-generation approach, and we do this work by doing really amazing convenings with various stakeholders, including parent voices. We have a fellowship of 3 national cohorts and 1 statewide cohort of leaders who are in health and human services realms, post-secondary leaders and the like, who are at various stages of 2Gen implementation and leading in that area. And then we also advance practice and policy solutions, and we have various work focus across 2Gen. We focus on all the continuum of education from K-12 or early childhood all the way through post-secondary. We think about family prosperity and work family supportive policies, health and human services, and more. I lead the effort that's focused on post-secondary success for parents, or we call the Post-Secondary Success for Parents Initiative. It's focused on the more than 4 million students who are parents enrolled in 2-year, 4-year baccalaureate pathways, as well as the however many million parents are enrolled in vocational pathways in this throughout the country. As part of this work, we have different pieces that are focused on various levers of the post-secondary systems, whether it be post-secondary leaders like colleges, state and federal policy, and importantly, I would say something that we are underscored in our work at Ascend in general is one of our key tenets is drawing on the expertise and experience of our families and parents who are involved in our work. And so through that, in our Post-Secondary Success for Parents Initiative, our PSP initiative, we have a group of parent advisors. We have done 2 cohorts of parent advisors, and with our second cohort of parent advisors, 3 of which you'll meet later today, we did a really innovative project alongside with our primary funder of the PSP initiative, Imaginable Futures, and that's called the Parent Power Solutions Fund. So the Parent Power Solutions Fund was again created by the Ascend Parent Advisors in partnership with Imaginable Futures, and is the realization of goals set by the first cohort of parent advisors. Something that they shared with us toward the end of their engagement was that they really wanted an opportunity to understand how philanthropy works. How could they get involved and do something that's participatory in mindset, have an opportunity to really be able to choose kind of how funds are being allotted toward some of the larger goals that we have in this work. And so in conversation with them, with Imaginable Futures, and also Ann Mosley and Marjorie Sims at Ascend, we came up with this idea around the Parent Power Solutions Fund. As far as we know, it's the first student parent-led fund of its kind. It provided 12-month grants totaling $150,000, so $25,000 to 6 organizations, nonprofit organizations that are supporting student parents and completing post-secondary programs, workforce development, career technical CTE programs, for example. And importantly, something that was key to these models is that they had to have the goal of PSP in mind, but also needed to be engaging student parent voice in some sort of substantive way, similar to how we're doing it in our work, in order to be considered to receive dollars from this fund. Next slide. So some of the goals of our PSP fund, as I already kind of alluded to, placing parent voices and their experiences at the center of philanthropic decision-making was key. This work was really, again, done in full partnership with our parent advisors. We provided a template of sorts that we have used at Ascend to build RFPs, but really the parents got to fill in all the gaps. I mean, they're the ones that chose 6 organizations to receive $25,000. That was their choosing. We said we have $150,000. How do what do you decide? How would you want to kind of divvy out that money? How do you want, what sort of parameters do you want to put around this fund? So that was something that they got to do. They also were able to choose the organizations through the process that we'll describe in a moment. This work also expanded opportunities to share parent and family narratives and recommendations with practitioners, policymakers, and philanthropists at local and national levels. It's important for us not to just touch on what colleges and state and federal policymakers are doing, but really wanted to have an opportunity for this to be an innovation that philanthropy saw in mind and had something that they would understand and believe that this is something that they should be doing in their work, how to engage parent voice. And so Venice will talk about that in a moment and kind of how that's important toward this larger effort. Of course, we want to build and capacity among these community-based organizations that we're investing into as through the fund. And then importantly, again, service and supporting solutions that parents believe to be the most effective in this space. Next slide. Sorry, Lexi, are you still there? Okay, so priority was given to applicants whose organizations brought a racial equity and intersectional lens to their work, proposed producing new tools, knowledge, or strategies. Of course, included parents in decision-making, which is something that was really key. Something else that our parents discussed were if they hired students or parents to serve other student parents. So again, thinking about how they can engage student parent voice, but importantly, compensate student parent voice, similar to what we do with our effort. We compensate our parent advisors to take part in this larger work. And then something that was also to kind of have this 2-gen frame in mind, thinking about programs that serve the children of the parents in their programs. So something else that the parents wanted to consider in this work. Next slide. So throughout our selection process, and this is something I shared a little bit earlier. So we had such amazing interest in this work. We ended up receiving 72 applications for this grant, and it was only open for about 6 to 8 weeks that the grant application timeline was. So it was really quick, but it was really amazing. We had some great applications. We ended up splitting the groups of our 11 parent advisors into 4 different groups of 2, 1 group of 2, and then 3 groups of 3. And those parent advisors groups reviewed 18 applications. So this is a lot of work that they put into this effort. And we created a rubric that was based off the RFP language to make sure it was kind of rooted in what we had already drafted. The parent advisor shared those initial reviews of applications, and then also importantly, something that they demarcated they really wanted were parent references. So there were opportunities for every applicant to share a letter or a video from a parent that has either taken place has either utilized the model or a parent that said, something that like this model would be really helpful to me, and this is why. So it was important to have the parent references, and that's something that our parent advisors chose to have part of this application process. So not just the narrative from the grantee or potential grantee, but also having a reference from one of the parents that would be served by this model. And then the top 18 applications were moved to the next round. The full parent advisor cohort reviewed the top 18 applicants, and then they submitted proposal scores for the finalists. And then we had a series of conversations, and I'm sure the parents can speak to that later, but really we've had a lot of thought and a lot of really great feedback and engagement from all 11 of our parent advisors, really thinking about kind of how this work it would serve if they themselves, if they were in that position, or kind of how they felt was impact was going to be had by these grants. So really, it took a while to get down to that final 6, but it was a really thoughtful process and really great conversations that led to those 6 being chosen. Next slide. So these are the 6 organizations that were chosen for the Parent Power Solutions Fund. We have Raise the Bar, which does amazing work in Minneapolis and Los Angeles, focused on scholarship, emergency aid, and other supports for single student parents. Community College of Aurora, which took part in the Strengthening Working Families Initiative before, and we're continuing this work that they had funding from the Department of Labor to support student parents enrolled in vocational pathways. I won't go into a lot of depth around Project Self-Sufficiency because we have Beth from Project Self-Sufficiency as part of the panel, so she'll share out more about their model in Orange County, California. Beyond Home, which is in Colorado, is focused on homelessness and providing resources to those who are formerly homeless or housing insecure. BRIA, which is an amazing dual public charter school, which has early childhood programming and vocational workforce programming for the mothers, mostly mothers and fathers of the students who are enrolled in their programs. And then the Knox County in Tennessee, their Community Action Committee, which is really around workforce development and engaging parent voice. And they are also have created a parent advisor model to help imbue that work with parent voice. Next slide. So I'd like to throw it over to our who I call my partner in crime, Venice Davis. We actually started the same day in this work, which is amazing. But Venice is a venture partner at Imaginable Futures and the lead of the post-secondary success for parents work at IF. Again, she's a huge partner in this work, and honestly, we wouldn't have been able to do this really innovative effort without having a funder who was ready to take the leap with us around engaging parent voice. So, Venice.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. Yes, that is very true. We are partners in crime. And really am grateful for the opportunity to support this work and to be in partnership with David and Ascend, as well as our parent advisors. As David mentioned, my name is Denise Davis. I am a venture partner with Imaginable Futures, a venture of the Omidyar Group. Imaginable Futures is a global philanthropic investment firm that believes that learning has the power to unlock human potential, and we take a systems change approach to solving the most complex problems in education. In the US, we have a 2-generation strategy where we seek to improve family well-being across little learners ages 0 through 5, because we believe that learning starts at birth. It actually starts in the womb. And so across little learners as well as adult learners. And specifically those who are raising children. We leverage multiple tools to achieve the impact that we want to see in the world. In 2017, we actually began this journey of investing in the post-secondary success of parents and their children for 3 main reasons. The first is parental outcomes. So over their lifetimes, single mothers with an associate degree working full-time, year-round, earn over $300,000 more than those with a high school diploma. Those with a bachelor's degree earn double compared to those with a high school diploma, double of those who had an associate's degree, so $600,000. Child outcomes is the second reason. While career and income advancement have an impact on the parent, it is just as impactful and even more on the lives of their children. A study has found that just a $1,000 increase in family income has resulted in up to 27% in increase in child cognitive development. And the third is societal outcomes. So single mothers with degrees make substantially more economic contributions to society. So when a single mother earns an associate's degree, they contribute an additional $36,000 in taxes. And that figure more than increases by 50% when that single mother earns a bachelor's degree. So 3 clear reasons why, data reasons why we were wanted to invest in the post-secondary success of student parents. But we also know that student parents are duly motivated, they're courageous, they are strong, they're resilient. And we come to this work from an asset-based approach. We believe in student parents and their abilities to not only transform their own lives, but the lives of their families, as well as multiple generations for the future. We also not only believe in that elevating the voices of student parents, we believe it's important that student parents have a voice at the table. We also believe that parents should create their own table and make the decisions at such table. So that's why we help fund the Parent Power Solutions Fund. In 2019, we provided Ascend with a grant that would fund the Parent Power Solutions Fund, and that David shared a lot of the background there. I'm excited that you will get to hear directly from the parent advisors about their experience. But I just wanted to share a couple of observations that I had from my perspective. So as a funder, while I listened into some of the meetings, I was a true observer and I listened. The parent advisors truly took ownership of this process and made every single decision. They became true grant makers, having healthy debates with each other when making final decisions. They pushed each other and they made the process better by doing so. And as you can see from the winners that David shared a few minutes ago, having parents make the decision resulted in a cohort that is deeply committed to the success of student parents and their families. I hope you enjoy the next part of the session, which is the most exciting part, hearing directly from our parent advisors about their experience. Thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you, Venice, for those remarks. As you see, we have a really amazing partner in IF in this work, so really appreciate their involvement. But as Venice mentioned, we're really here for the parents and also for Beth as well as one of the grantees of this effort. I would like to introduce our moderator, one of our parent advisors, Joslyn Hernandez. Joslyn is actually going to be, or is already in the midst of celebrating a major accomplishment, but it happens officially tomorrow, I guess. She's graduating from University of Maryland with a degree in political science, a bachelor's degree. She's also a Generation Hope scholar and a really strong advocate for student parents, but also for undocumented students. So Joslyn is going to take over from here, allow for introductions from our panelists, and then jump into some amazing questions. So take it away, Joslyn.
Thank you so much, David. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be here. First, I would like to introduce Jesus Benitez, who is my fellow parent advisor. And I will give Jesus just a couple of minutes for him to introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jesus Benitez. I work with CUNY Fatherhood Academy as a mentor coordinator, and we work with students from 18 to 30, young fathers who want to get their GED, and I'm a student parent advisor.
Next up, I will introduce Michaela. Michaela, if you could please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Michaela Martin. I'm a rising third-year law student at the University of Laverne and a student parent advocate. Just this week, actually, we were able to pass a bill in Oregon. I'm sure a lot of folks, especially at this conference, have heard this, that will collect data on how many student parents there are in higher education.
And last but not least, our guest from Project Self-Sufficiency, Beth Jackson Pardo, if you could please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the Executive Director of Project Self-Sufficiency, which is a nonprofit in Southern California that serves single parents in college. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna just dive into the first question. I know being part of this project meant a lot for us because it was really the first time we were able to have a seat at the table. What were your initial thoughts when you learned that you would be developing a grant program? And we can start with Michaela.
I was houseless when Aspen called me. So I was like, I don't even know that, like, even to this day, that was, you know, like what, like a year and a half ago, that I have like words to express. Like when I got the call from Portia, who is then helping put things together, I was in the parking lot of my school with my son, who was like running around as they do, right? And I'm like stressing and like trying to like have this call, and she's like, yes, like we, you know, are you interested in being a parent advisor? And I just can't, I can't get over that somebody was like, oh yeah, like we think that your voice is important. And I was at like in such a hard state. So like, yeah, it really gave me confidence in a lot of different ways. I was very excited. I'm still excited.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with Michaela. I actually was thinking about dropping out of school because it was just too much again. And like I remember getting a phone call and telling me about this student parent advisors with Ascend. And I'm like, oh man, I can't give up again. I can't give up since I had taken a year off before. And I'm like, nah, I gotta stay and finish this. So I mean, it's really exciting for sure. So yeah.
Michaela, you mentioned that when you received this call from Portia, you were houseless. So in the selection process, what elements were most important when we were selecting the grantees to you?
I really thought about diversity. So Jesus and I actually were like paired up during the process. So we're also excited that we got to be on the panel together. So like one of the things we looked at was like not just diversity in like the people that were part of the program, but also like amongst the program, right? Were they looking at like housing and those kinds of things, but also instead of just having 6 programs that all worked on explicitly housing, we also looked at whether or not some of them did policy or were doing different like program or systematic changes to help kind of a larger narrative. And then also like a geographical kind of like differences so that they weren't all like located in one area. So I say like overall diversity in all of the different ways. Jesus and I would look, because we had a section that asked about the diversity of participants in program. And so we really wanted to see whether or not they were engaging in marginalized communities, whether that was ethnicity or income or those different forms.
Yeah, we looked into the diversity within the program, but also in a macro level. And even looking at the budget, we were talking about to kind of make sure that the money was going to the students or to the program itself. So we wanted to make sure that the money was going to what it was supposed to be going to. So that's how we've kind of looked into the whole process of selecting these programs.
When you guys mean like you wanted to choose like a diversity, like you wanted to ensure the diversity was present, what would you say that you used to like measure the diversity, like when you were going through the applications?
In a lot of the applications, we asked about diversity. So we was looking at the numbers of the students they were serving and the difference between each programs as well. So we were comparing all the programs we were choosing as a whole.
Yeah, I think we looked at the numbers, but also like even if, you know, because you do have areas that are predominantly one like ethnicity or like one income, like also these are programs serving low income folks. But we also looked like within the RFP themselves. So even if they had like a high number of like Caucasian students and we weren't like, oh, they're not diverse enough, we'd also look to see like whether or not they were actually trying to engage, right? So if you have an application that's like, oh, we seek out, you know, partnerships with different organizations that represent marginalized communities, like in our heads, we were like, okay, well, like they're trying to embrace that kind of diversity.
And staying on the topic of diversity, I know as parents advisors, we're a very, very diverse cohort. I mean, we're scattered all over the US. Michaela is it's like 6 a.m. because she's in Oregon. Jesus is in New York and I'm here in Maryland. So every parent advisors is just it's somewhere on the dot in the country. How do you guys think that our grantees reflected the diversity of our cohort?
I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like Venice said, we had these, healthy debates. And for me as a philosopher, I thought it was pretty cool to see all these different perspectives. There's things that when we were doing the application process, Michaela saw some different things that I didn't, and vice versa. And and with all the parent advisors, it was the same thing. I was just so amazed how, how we saw things differently, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think not, not just like geographically are we different, but we all come from different like experiences, right? Like, and different types of programming experience. So where like Jesus has experience like within single father or like within fatherhood, advancement. I'm not wording that well, Jesus, I'm so sorry. Like my background like was like more policy. Like I've been pushing for that bill for years. So I was very like policy minded, where you have like Amber, who's worked in a childcare, family resource center for a long time. And so her experience was like a different kind of program than Jesus. So we really brought like a lot of different kinds of those experiences to the table.
Yeah, and like one of the other parent advisors, Drayton, he comes from New York too, but his experience in is different, even though we do have some similarities. But something like not having night schools at Washington, I thought that was a normal thing that I didn't realize other states didn't have, things like that.
In staying on the topic of diversity still, do you guys think that being such a diverse cohort at sometimes made it difficult to make choices for the grantees?
I think I make things difficult, and maybe I should apologize to my cohort more because I just I have a lot of questions and there are a lot of things in my brain. One of the things that like I really thought of while we were doing this is that, like, for example, California has a lot of really amazing programs. And I personally have been a bit convinced that part of that is because there's a hyper division of wealth that occurs in California that doesn't occur in all places. So when you have that, you have folks that are, again, extremely poor and extremely wealthy. And those folks who have more can sometimes have these really great programs. But those programs not being in other places isn't reflective of a lack of need. And so I think was very like firm on like, yes, those are great programs. However, like we should look at some new programs too. Like that was kind of another form of diversity that we thought was fairly important, was not just picking all established programs, looking at like a new program who maybe doesn't have as much because they've never been invested in, and kind of giving them that opportunity to see what could grow. But
I mean, for me, it was different because, I've always been in the front lines helping students. So when Michaela asked the question, I was like, oh, I've never really thought about that, or, I've never thought about those kind of, looking at it in a whole different lens. So I thought it was pretty cool.
And being that we were scattered all over the country, and sometimes it was hard to get us kind of in a meeting together, I would say. And the COVID pandemic, it just made things a lot more difficult. What were your thoughts? When you came into the grant making process, did they change throughout when you saw the pandemic hit and then we were like, there are different issues that we have to tackle now, or the issues are the same, they're just even worse?
I realized that the student parent struggle is real. We all struggle in a different way. I know that, I was struggling a lot mentally, and, but what was cool was that I was able to kind of lean on some of the student and parent advisors. So, The pandemic did make it a little worse. And I want to say maybe for a lot of student parents, but it's interesting because I mean, we always have a lot of things going on, so it kind of munched everything together.
I think that I've seen this in my classes too. Like law school online is super weird because like you already have a lot of like really contentious, argumentative people all stuck in one room. And I've noticed that on Zoom, some of my classmates will like kind of like talk to each other in a way that I don't believe that they would in person. And I think that sometimes that's because you aren't getting any of that side chatter. And I kind of mentioned that with our group, like it's hard because when we're having these really like intensive, long conversations about like a lot of money and like there's a lot of passion, when we're just on Zoom, we're not getting that like, oh, we had breakfast together and we've been relationship building and we're having those kinds of like, interpersonal, but also like side conversations related to what we're discussing as a group, which definitely creates a different tone and a different type of conversation, I think. So I think that COVID really changed it in that way, but also in the priorities. I think that there was like a lot of discussion around whether or not we wanted to fund primarily direct service supports, which is like or programs or organizations that provide like housing or provide like that kind of direct versus like a program that does like policy change or advocacy, because those are two types of ways to, and they're very different, to support student parents, both of which are totally necessary and needed to be able to elevate student parents, but balancing that, especially as student parents ourselves who are all struggling, just made for very, very interesting conversation.
This one's more for Jesus, but Michaela, if you have something to say, chime in. So, you and I have both been part of, I would say, like nonprofit programs that really elevate the voices of student parents and really provide wraparound services for student parents. So in the process of when you were selecting or when you were, I guess critiquing the applications, were you thinking about, okay, like my program, this is what they have, and this is a really great program, I want another program that looks like mine, or, this is something that my program could do different. So maybe this program has it and has all the other qualities that my program, because I know for me, it was kind of hard sometimes. I was kind of like, since I'm part of Generation Hope, I was like, I really love Generation Hope. Like, I don't know what they could be doing more. Like they're doing 2Gen, they're helping me with my kiddos, get them ready for kindergarten and all of that. And like the tuition assistance, the mentor, like all of that. And sometimes I was like, maybe something like that, but I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, I was also an alumni from CUNY Fatherhood Academy, and I always say that I wouldn't be here without them. They're actually the ones that pushed me to get after my GED to enroll into college. So, all the support that I got from them, I've kind of had it on the background of trying to like look at these programs, very objective, but also kind of very personal. And CUNY Fatherhood Academy always acted as an unofficial 2Gen program. So I kind of was looking into that and using that as my guide because, there's also so much that a paper cannot tell you. So, I was just looking at what the possibilities that can come from that program, and use it as a guide because our program, I don't want to say, of course, but we do help a lot of students. We do help a lot of students. And I want to see that in other states for sure.
You want to add anything, Michaela?
I'm not from the organizational standpoint, but I do, and I have openly admitted that because my focus has been in policy, that I really wanted to see what they were doing outside of So basically the opposite of what you said was not just the supports or programming that they had, but like, how was that lending to change? Because I think it's important to help people through school, but sometimes I get like a little bit passionate in that I think that that's almost a band-aid and like sometimes, which is like totally needed, but like, I really wanted to see how they were taking that and helping things as they are, but then also how they were going to change it so that people didn't need that kind of support going forward.
That's why it's pretty cool. Our group was pretty cool because she, Michaela had a whole different perspective and mine's too. So it was pretty cool to have that conversation because we actually both sat down together through Zoom, phone calls and having these conversations while we were reading down, while we were, analyzing all these applications.
And now, it's been a couple months since we did the final choices, and we've had months to really marinate in the fact that we were grant makers. Is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I should be patient. Like, I'm just like being very candid with this. And also like, I think that something that Jesus and I did different that wasn't like necessarily like required or just kind of ended up how we did it is that we went through all of in that first wave, we went through all of them before scoring them. And so I think that that was really important because then we were able to more like rank our choices, which is not something that I think any of us really thought about when we were going into it, because it's hard to visualize a process that you're making beforehand when you've never done anything like it. So I mean, like, I'm really proud of our whole group, like everybody. I think that everybody brought a lot to the table. And I think that honestly, like, it's in a lot of ways a really good sign that we did have a lot of like hard conversations, because if we weren't having those conversations and like, what were we doing, like how else are you gonna get to what we got, which I think is like a beautiful mixture of programs. Like, I think that, like, I'm really proud of that. I don't know about everyone else, but like, I think that we did great. Like,
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would change something. I always thought this was a group work and that's what we did. So, I had fun. The only thing is that I wasn't too knowledgeable on policy. So it gave me the chance to pick Michaela's brain a lot and learn and kind of go more into that field to see, just be more knowledgeable.
What are the most valuable learnings from serving as a grant maker through the Solutions Fund?
I have one that's like very tangible. Something, I guess maybe this also goes into something I change. I'm not sure, but something that I didn't know when we were reviewing them was how nonprofits and universities funding structures work. So like how a lot of times they have this whole like percentage of staff time thing that they have to do for their any kind of like grant funding applications and things. And I didn't know any about that. So sometimes when I'd see something and there was like a lot of staff budget, he's laughing. If there was like a lot of like staff line budget, I was like, oh, like, why do they need a whole new person? Or like, why are they doing it that way? And so I would say that that was like a huge takeaway, was that I knew nothing of the funding structures for nonprofits. I thought I knew something. I was totally wrong. Yeah. So that was very tangible learning.
I mean, I didn't know nothing either, but I learned a lot in how the budget structure, because I kept looking at the budget to see, where the money was going. And I've learned a lot, like how organized it was and like how the money it's actually used, which was pretty interesting. So that was cool for me.
Yeah, I know for me, it was definitely, like Michaela says, it was a learning process. It was a learning process. I was looking at the budgets and I was like, why do we need like what does this mean? And I remember David would always tell us, don't worry about the budget. If you have questions, you can ask us. But thankfully, I guess my other fellow parent advisors who I was paired with, they were able to really kind of help me and walk me through. And I guess they were asking the questions before I got to asking them. So they were like, no, like, this is what it means. So that was really good. So my next question is going to be for our guests from Project Self-Sufficiency. Project Self-Sufficiency was one of our grantees. Can you tell the audience about how Project Self-Sufficiency and how did your organization utilize like the 2-gen approach?
Sure. So just kind of a little background info on us. We're based in Orange County, California, which is exactly like Michaela described, an area with extreme income inequality. So what we do is we provide flexible financial assistance and case management for single parents in college for several years until they graduate, and then 6 months after that as they transition into their careers. So examples of our services would be rental assistance, textbook help, auto repair, professional development opportunities. It's a model that's based on a lot of parent feedback, and it kind of evolves as needed, and it's a model we think can be replicated elsewhere. 3/4 of our participants are women of color. Most are first-generation college students, and the majority are domestic violence survivors. So the way our organization utilizes the 2-gen approach is through funding childcare assistance for families. We fund summer activities, in particular for children, holiday support, family-friendly events, and then more recently our technology program, which supports both parents and kids with necessary tech for online learning like laptops and tablets. As part of the Parent Powered Solutions Fund, we were able to hire 2 student parent advisors, and they have really helped us consider the whole family when making decisions about our programming.
You said that you guys hired parent advisors for your organization. How has that changed the way you guys make choices within the organization, if they influence any of it?
Yeah, I think we had always, felt pretty good about, we're using the student parent voice. We did focus groups, we do polls, we've had former participants on our board, but I think hiring the student parent advisors was really an opportunity for us to formalize our commitment to that ideal. And then just having them in the room and at the table and having a voice more frequently was really valuable. An example that I give is we were going to do a donation drive. And so I had polled our participants, several months ago, what do you need right now? And at the top of the list were groceries and cleaning supplies. And so when we were designing this donation drive, it was going to be around Mother's Day. So we were all set to all right, we're going to collect grocery gift cards and cleaning supplies. And our student parent advisor said, hey, it's around Mother's Day. I would rather be celebrated as being a mom. You can give me cleaning supplies later in the summer, but I think just emotionally, that's what I would be looking for. And so it was a moment for us to step back and say, yes, we use the student parent voice in polling our students about what they needed, but she brought that very human perspective. And so we ended up doing care packages for the single moms in our programs with flowers and a drive-through food event. And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. A mom said, I have teenagers and little kids. I don't get a whole lot of Happy Mother's Day from them. They don't really get it. And so an event like this made them feel appreciated. So that's kind of an example of how having student parent advisors in the room more frequently has really just impacted our program in a really positive way.
And how can other organizations establish the right infrastructure to turn decision-making power to the communities they serve, just like you guys have?
I think for us, it's really being about just being very intentional about building these voices into the infrastructure of the organization, make it a structured and compensated part of the organization. By weaving it into the fabric of the organization, it becomes part of the organizational culture, so that when there are leadership changes or staff changes or constituent changes, those processes will remain in place because it's an established piece. So this is what we value, this is what we do. And so you're not going to see those programs or processes lapse if there's changes down the road. I guess my other advice is just that it's okay to start small. So like, you know, running a focus group or making sure somebody on your board is a former participant. Like these things are still helpful and a good first step. Like you don't have to, you know, completely overhaul the organization overnight. And then I think for us, the next step was really asking, you know, how do we move beyond and make sure we're actually shifting the power dynamic? And I think that for us was hiring the student parent advisors and making them a compensated part of the team. Not just using the student parent voice, but, you know, paying them for it. I think that was an important step for us. And I think my final advice would just be to listen and stay humble. You know, student parents are not a monolith. They come from so many different backgrounds. And so just to always be asking questions and then kind of sit back and listen.
Okay. And then my final question is going to be for all. And this one is, what impact do you hope the solutions funds will have on the larger student parent ecosystem?
I could share just because I'm not muted yet. I think it's going to make organizations think a little bit more critically about their commitment to really power sharing and power shifting and letting go of the ego and letting go of a little bit of that power. Not just, you know, doing a survey, seeing what clients want, and then saying, okay, well, I think this is how we're going to go about it, but including student parents and the voices of the community we serve in that decision-making process. So it's not just using information, but having them at the table with a voice and with power.
I like to see like the normality of like student parents, you know, being in college and realizing that we don't want handouts. We just need the support to, you know, succeed in this post-secondary journey.
Yeah, nothing about us without us, you know, like you can't run student parent programs without having student parents in that decision-making process. So I think that one of the things we looked at within the solutions funds too is like how they were engaging their parents. Like, are they just bringing on like one student parents to kind of be the like for lack of a better word, that kind of like token student parent? Like, because as a student parent, that can be pretty overwhelming because then you have like a whole board of people that are like trying to tell you, or like sometimes maybe they don't realize they're kind of trying to convince you to like see what they're doing as being the right way to do it. So like I love that Beth and Project Self-Sufficiency was creating a board, because there's power in that, right? They have each other that they can talk to and they can kind of work that way. So in that larger narrative, Joslyn has a really great quote. I believe that you were the first one that said it when we first met. Did you say
Yeah.
if you were?
If I am not on the table, if I am not at the table, I'm on the menu. So I do remember our first meeting, you know, it was really important for me to be given a place at the table to make those choices.
I think in the larger narrative, like Aspen and Imaginable Futures really are showing that, embodying that narrative. And I hope that not just the funding and the programming that like will come out of this, but like having that kind of shift towards kind of embodying that idea of student parents being at the forefront like we were, and we also got to help ensure that other student parents would have their voice heard too.
Thank you so much. And since we do have a little bit of extra time, I am now going to pass it over to Lexi, who will carry us out.
Awesome, Joslyn. Thanks so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. I want to thank Michaela, Jesus, Beth, Joslyn, Venice. Thanks, everyone. While we have you all, I was hoping that our parent advisors could share a little bit about a podcast that we've been doing. It's called the 1 in 5 podcast, based on the 1 in 5 students who are parents in undergraduate, pursuing undergraduate degrees. So Jesus, would you be willing to preview a little bit of your episode for the folks who are joining us today. Could you just share a little bit about, what the experience was like for you and what you are hoping folks will take away from your episode?
Sure. It was a pretty interesting process. I was very nervous to kind of have this conversation, I guess in a platform where everyone can hear it. And it was just basically talking about my journey from being a non-traditional student to getting my GED, and then I get inspired to go to college and get a degree, which never thought of, and have this opportunity to see my son grow in the process as well. I didn't realize how much of an impact it will have in my family. So it's kind of that whole, I guess, conversation of like, why I didn't go to school, and then going to school, and yeah.
Thanks, Jesus, for sharing. Really appreciate that. And Joslyn, since your episode is will be the most recent one to drop, could you share a little bit about what you're hoping folks will take away from it?
Yeah, I think for mine, I would really just want people to understand that being a student parent, sometimes it's not the only hat you wear. It's not the only thing that you kind of have to deal with when you're on your journey for post-secondary education. And I think my episode really, really emphasizes that as a DACA recipient, there were twice as many hurdles that I had to jump because I was DACA, and there's already so much in place, so many barriers in place, for DACA students to attain a post-secondary education and undocumented students. And then we add this other layer of being a student parent and being a teenage mother. There's so many different layers on top of that you get so consumed, and you're just like, this isn't something that you can do, and especially when research and just everything around you is telling you, people like you are not meant to be successful. People like you are not meant to thrive. And, tomorrow that becomes squashed, because tomorrow I get my degree, my bachelor's degree in government and politics and political science. I've squashed that stereotype, and I've squashed that narrative that because you're a student parent and that you're undocumented, that's not possible. It is possible, but it's much, much harder to get around, and it's so much more difficult to navigate the college system. And so I really hope that when people listen to that episode, they can view things through, different lens, and really, really view the efforts, that many of us, and it's not just, this is where we started. It's kind of like most of that has been the culmination of sometimes years of other things that have happened, or that's, been going on behind the scenes. So my hopes are that just people can really open up and just really realize, and be more empathetic, and just realize, that there's a lot more layers to us than we would like to think.
So powerful, Joslyn. We are so proud of you. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thanks for sharing your expertise. And everyone, I can't wait for you all to listen to the episode. I am certain that you are going to learn a ton. Thank you so much, Joslyn.
Thank you.
And I guess, Michaela, would you also just be willing to share a little bit about your episode, especially with the passage of your bill? What would you like folks to know, and what are you hoping that your episode will bring to the student parent ecosystem?
First, I really, really want to say congratulations to Joslyn. Like, you're doing such great work, and I am so proud of you for making it to graduation. Like, I'm like so excited for you. And I just really wanted to say that.
I do want to point out that you have inspired me, and my next eyes are law school. So,
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. Don't. I've been crying all week.
so I have my eyes set on law school, so I will be,
Let's do it. I got you.
I'll be connecting with you once I get that.
Yes. So that, I guess that also segues into like, that's what I hope that my podcast can do for somebody, right? I really am going to get emotional. It's really early in the morning. Okay. I'm struggling. Like, I shared a lot of things in my podcast that I have close friends that I've known for years that didn't know about, like my trauma and just like the things that I experienced like when I was young. And so like that was really, really hard. I don't necessarily know why I did that. She started asking questions and I'm kind of an oversharer. She was really good. And so I think, but I also thought it was important to share my truth, and in ways like that it was really healing for me to like have that, and to like have that moment to like really like share that part of myself. But I talk a lot about like the bill, and we talk about policy and about how saucy I am with my professors. I'm really working on it. And that it wasn't just me, right? Like I didn't make it to law school because like I picked myself up by the bootstraps, or I like work so much harder than anybody else. Like I have a lot of privilege, and I am very, very blessed in that, I have a parents that is very supportive of my journey, and I was able to get public assistance for housing, and I read a lot, so I'm kind of a nerd, so I had that kind of like educational like advantage. But I also dropped out of high school, so I just want folks to know that that there are options and that you can find people. And I just hope that like in all of the ways that Aspen and the other podcasts have made me feel a little less alone, I hope that mine can serve to maybe make somebody else feel just a little less alone. Maybe that's a sad way to put it. I'm sorry.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Joslyn. Thank you, Jesus, for your vulnerability and for allowing us to be a part of your village. Thank you so much. And thank you to you all for joining. Again, just want to plug again that the podcast we're referring to is called the 1 in 5 Podcast, and you can find it on basically anywhere you listen to podcasts. So we're happy to give you back 15 minutes of your day. At 11:15, we'll break for a 30-minute lunch break. And then there will be a keynote address that will begin at 11:45 a.m. Eastern. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.